I think it's probably important to make mention, Chair, that under normal circumstances, in normal years, we've had homicides in relation to domestic violence. We haven't had any this year, which is about the only positive thing I could say. But I mean, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that our domestic violence rate has decreased, because it hasn't. I can only refer to our 2006-2007 stats. 2006, we had about 6,600 domestic violence occurrences. In 2007, we had 7,500. So it's an increasing problem, and I think everybody has to remember that it's probably one of the most dangerous situations that our officers go in, and that's why we send 2 in to every domestic violence call. This is basically the map of the region, minus Caledon, obviously. Basically, it's we color-coded it. The bottom left in the pink is 11 Division, which is the southwest corner of Mississauga. 12 Division is the southeast. The green portion is the airport, and then, of course, the yellow, northeast Brampton, and the blue is northwest Brampton. The airport is in green. Out of the 20 homicides, Mr. Chairman, 12 of them have been in Mississauga, 8 have occurred in Brampton. And of those, there was 8 shootings, 9 stabbings, and 3 committed by other means. Been a lot of discussion, Mr. Chairman, in relation to firearms and edged weapons, as well as as far as the press is concerned. We have our problems with firearms and shooting incidents. So far in 2008, there's been 40 shooting incidents at a person, directed at a person. 8 of those are the homicides. In the same period last year, we had 19 shootings, with 4 being homicides. So there is a concern with firearms and the homicide rate there as well. We've also had 16 separate incidents with shots fired with no specific person intended. So overall, we've had about 56 shooting incidents. And I think when you put that in perspective with the population, even though it's an increase, but I guess it comes down to, and subject to further discussion with council, what is the acceptable rate? I'm not sure I could give you a benchmark acceptable rate. And I think one thing to put it all in perspective as well is 2 of these shootings were police officers. One of them was one of your officers, Pure Regional Police officers, and another was an OPP officer. I know specifically in our incident, the officer returned fire, and it was a non-fatal injury to the accused. But we had to go through a lengthy SIU investigation, and I think you got to worry about the psychology of the officers involved in these things too. And again, that's a concern to me. As far as firearms are concerned, we pretty well are at the same level this year as we were last year. So far, up to September 30th, again, we had 356 occurrences where a firearm was seized, and a total of 674 guns. The same period in 2007, we had about 651 guns seized. The stabbings, obviously, we've had edged weapons, or seem to be the weapon of choice, because they're easily accessible. We've had 333 incidents where a knife has been used in a commission of an offense, 9 of those being the homicide numbers that I gave. I think another important component to this is 74% clearance rate on these. We take this very seriously. And those, when I talk about edged weapons in the commission of an offense, it could go anywhere from aggravated assault, which is the definition of you wound, maim, or disfigure someone, down to a number of threatening occurrences with a knife. So even though I'm here talking about the homicide rate, there are some other issues in relation to violent crime that I thought we should bring to the attention of council, Mr. Chairman. The next part, I wanted to show council what we've been doing, and I know I have an appreciation that we go budget after budget, and you have a tendency not to remember how good you've been to us, I guess, and supportive in the programs we've initiated, and how it's all come together. We made a significant investment in our schools. I think you can look at this slide. Again, it's color-coded the same way we did previously. In relation to our high schools, in 11 Division, we've got 26 officers in our high schools. And there's 18 high schools, plus there's about 60 feeder schools. 12 Division, we've got 23 officers assigned to 13 high schools and 40 feeder schools. 21 Division, we've got 19 officers assigned to 11 high schools and 39 feeder schools. And in 22 Division, we've got 19 officers assigned to 11 high schools and 31 feeder schools. And what we did, Mr. Chairman, probably a couple of years ago, we developed a youth intervention monitoring program. And these are basically the younger children that were on the edge of probably getting into criminal activity. A lot of them were susceptible to getting into some gang activity. And we wanted to do a mentoring program, so to speak. So the officers basically take extra time with these young people because, let's face it, they're our future, and we need to spend time with them. So each officer in 11 Division, those 26 officers have 42 young people that they mentor. And this may be counseling sessions, it may be home visits to talk to the parents, to give them some encouragement, maybe helping with some schoolwork. Unfortunately, the new math is getting away from us, but we certainly do make that effort, and I think it's well worthwhile. But in total, Mr. Chairman, we've got 87 officers working in our high schools right now, in our feeder schools, and probably about 144 young people who we do mentor. And that is a significant investment for this council. You're probably talking about $10 million, to be quite honest with you. But I think it's money well spent, and it's something we can't afford to jeopardize or ever roll back. I think we're in there, and I guess when I sit in front of regional council, the problem is I can't capture what we prevented, but I know and I'm quite convinced that we have prevented. I mean, there is some successes as far as the intervention and monitoring program. The schools have been very supportive, and you probably remember, Mr. Chairman, the school board came in and made a presentation in relation to the feeder schools, and very supportive. In fact, they'd like to make it somewhat bigger if we could. Again, this is the investment, and I appreciate the fact that some of this is difficult to read up, but I think we passed out larger copies, Mr. Chairman. These are all the programs that we offer, and as you see from the legend, it's the community liaison officers, crime prevention services, our ICE unit, internet child exploitation, morality. The important components are NPU, they spend most of their time. The safety village, tech crime, and youth ed is very important. If you look at the preschool, I kind of wondered about that when I looked at it, but we do receive requests, basically from, it's even before, it's daycare centers, where we do go in and talk to children to age 3 to learn about police officers, what they do, and stranger awareness. And it seems to be well received from that. And again, I think it's one of those important youth education projects that we undertake. And I won't sit here and go through each one, Mr. Chairman. You can see what we do at the elementary school level, ages 4 to 11. We go right from bicycle safety, youth crime, making good choices, youth in the law, street proofing. The RAID program is a very successful program, reduce abuse and drugs. Then you get into the junior age, 12 to 13, bullying, which is a big problem. And I think what we found with bullying, to be quite honest with Chairman, is some kids don't know they're bullies. They think it's teasing, they think it's fun, they think it's something in jest, and sometimes it's very easily corrected. Sometimes not. But it's cyber proofing, I think, is very important it's something, again, we certainly wouldn't want to jeopardize. Drug prevention, it's probably offered at that age. It should be sooner. We do touch on it in other areas, but I think we need a more sustained effort in relation to that. You get into high school, basically ages 14 to 17, bullying again, the criminal justice system, and our main focus is you don't want to be involved in the criminal justice system. And unfortunately, we got to get into date rape and date rape drugs, what to look for and how to avoid it. Introduction to NPU, and the Youth Criminal Justice Act. And then we go on right from there to the far right portion, to the adults. And we offer what we can. The Crime Prevention Academy is very successful, as one of the crime prevention services. Cyber safety is basically information for the parents, what to watch for, so your children don't get involved into some relationship online that they shouldn't be getting involved in. Street gang drug abuse, what to look for in your children, and what to avoid as far as drug abuse is concerned. So I think, as I say, Mr. Chairman, I won't go through each and every one of them. I have an explanation here if any member of council or member of the press want a more detailed account of what we did. Proactive units. Again, I think probably don't need to go through each and every one of them, Mr. Chairman, but offender management, street gang unit, which has been supported by council in the past, threat assessment unit for each individual who goes onto the sex offender registry. We actually do a threat assessment on it. By-class, which is an obligation we have to the OPP in the province. STEP, which is a very successful program we got from the government grant. It runs to, we got just over $1 million in relation to a uniform response to gang problems. We call it STEP. And the grant runs out in March of 2009, and hopefully we can go back to the province and get some more money funding for that, because it has been very successful. Crime prevention services, Crime Stoppers, I think everybody knows. Elder abuse, which is becoming an ever-increasing problem, certainly with our aging population. Family violence, I did basically touch on that. ICE, again, the child exploitation involves luring, child pornography. NPU, which we've gone through, the sex offender registry, special victims, street crime and tech crime. Those are just some of the programs, Mr. Chairman, and that is basically the presentation in as much detail. I'm certainly quite prepared to take questions from council.
Mayor McCallan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you for arranging this session. As you know, I wrote the chief knows, asking him to come before our council to advise us or to bring us up to date and to see what role we can play. I don't know what role we can play, but I'm anxious to find out what role we can play. And so this morning, unfortunately, only 3 of us are here from Mississauga Council, but I think the presentation has been excellent. First of all, I have absolutely no concern that you'll solve the homicides. I think your record speaks for it. The problem is, how do we prevent it? You're having to solve it. And that is really my concern. Let's put it this way. Your program, you've got a lot of programs there, and they're all working, I'm sure. I only want to speak of one that I experience is working, and that is the police in the schools. I visit a lot of schools, and I know that principals have told me that the students will go to the police sometimes before they'll go to their teacher to tell them about a home problem or whatever. And I think that's quite a compliment to see these young officers in the schools listening to the students. I think that we need to be I know it's hard for you to divulge to us, but I would like to know what is the cause. In other words, this one in the paper this morning is one, you know, the young teen is walking home from school. Now, does that mean that somebody just saw a kid walking home from school and pulled out a gun and shot him? What is behind that? I mean, what is behind it? There's something behind it, other than somebody that's just going around with a gun shooting people. So these are the things that I think we should hope that you can divulge to us in some way or other at the appropriate time. And as you know, you can't when it's under investigation. But you know, you read this and it upsets you that a kid walking home from school is shot. I mean, come on. That means that could happen any day in any area. And what is wrong with it? I have problems with the justice system, and you know that, Mr. Chief. I've talked to you about it, and I've talked to Emily. I think that we've got to, I think we as communities or municipalities have got to take hold of that issue. I think that's something we can get our teeth into, and that is that the justice system has got to be reviewed. It's hard to believe that the police do their job, and the next thing, that person is out on the street committing the same offense within, and there's one in the paper just this week in Toronto. He was out on bail. I mean, this is something that we, I think, as municipalities, should be doing something about. I'd like to know more about the breakdown of your statistics into adults and students and young people, those that have graduated. I had a luncheon the other day that one of your deputies was at with the RCMP and etc. And it was the concern of all of us at that luncheon, police were well represented there, that you go to schools and the junior schools, you look at it, it is United Nations, absolutely, all working together enthusiastically. The Hazel McCallion School raised $19,800 for the Terry Fox run. And they were just, I mean, you went into that room and it was bubbling them all, and it was the United Nations. And yet when they go from the junior school to high school, they separate. Not saying they form gangs, but I mean, sure, not saying they form gangs, they separate. And that is hard to explain, and nobody seemed to have an explanation for it. We discussed it and etc. So that is a concern. And I'm just wondering if a meeting with the student councils of all the high schools would help for you to meet with them, to explain to them what you're experiencing and maybe how they can help. Because young people talking to young people is very helpful, instead of adults trying to tell them which way they should be going. I'm wondering if that is a suggestion. But what I'm looking for is how we can help. What suggestions have you got that we as a city can help with prevention? Because prevention is the key to it. You've got excellent programs there for prevention, but I'm not sure it's, when you see the increase in homicides, it worries me as mayor as to whether we as a city, as a council and staff of the city, we're spending a lot of money like the police are, on preventative measures. You know, the recreational programs, Brampton, Mississauga. I mean, we're building these huge community centers at a very high cost, and how do we get to the bottom of the problem in order to, are we doing it the right way or doing it the wrong way? Is there something, where is the gap in our programs and in our preventative program? And we have to look to you folks for that. And as I say, I think we have a police force in the region of Peel, in Mississauga and Brampton. They're doing an excellent job. And when you look at all those programs, we're spending a lot of money on programs. What is missing? Now, breakdown in families have to tell you. We talked the other day about mom and dad both working. We're running programs in Mississauga to try to get the kids after school to come to our community centers, instead of them going out and hanging around the plazas and et cetera, and going home and such, for two reasons, for health reasons and for keeping them busy. So what more can we do is the question I'm asking, and that's why I was inviting you down to talk to our council as to what advice can you give us from your experience out there. And knowing the reason for these crimes that you can't divulge to us in some cases is a key to it. What is the reason that this young lad was shot walking home from school? There's something behind it.
Well, we always do the analysis on each and every murder there, and trying to find a common thread. In each 20 we've had, we can't. It's just, they're senseless, and the ones I talked about, altercation, they're just a senseless reaction to, and sometimes minor incidents. Yeah, and it's deadly results, and we have to come in and clean up. But I think it's important to know that we've had out of the 15 homicides we've solved this year, there were actually 14 incidents. But 13 of those 14 incidents, the culprit and the victim had a prior relationship. They either knew each other, there was a friendship. So I want to make it clear to everybody, it's not just random walk down the street, you're in trouble, because that is not the case. And if I can alleviate the public's fear on that, it isn't. There are there's relationships to it. I can't disagree with your comment in relation to the breakdown of family values, family home, because I do agree with you. A lot of these young people are looking for some guidance, some mentoring, somebody to help them, show them the way, and it's not there. And I don't think you can arbitrarily blame the single parent, because a lot of times they're working hard to do everything they can. And so sometimes we have to be our brother's keeper. We do. And I think if we can make a helpful input in relation to our mentoring and monitoring program, I think it's money well spent. Because I'd rather spend 10% on an officer's salary now than the $1.4 million it's going to cost me to prosecute them in a homicide trial. And you hate to break it down to money, but you know, sometimes in some of these interviews in relation to precedent 20 homicides, they're not just stats, they're not just numbers, they're tragic events for the families. They really are. I mean, and I've gone to some of these homes, and there's not a lot of times I'm stuck for words, but sometimes I am. Because I don't know what you say to the family like this young man Tuesday night. You can express your sympathy, but they're looking for an answer, and I don't have it, because it's senseless. A lot of these are just absolutely senseless. I think when I asked council to give me 8 extra bike unit officers so we can start working in the feeder school, I think that's the secret. It's either social services or it's us in the younger schools to prepare them to go into high school. Because, and you're right, there seems to be a change when they get into high school. That's when they get into what I call the age of entitlement. I want it now, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take it. And that's the attitude we've got to change, because it'll save us a whole lot of grief. This is not an overnight solution, and I agree with you 100%. But I think it's social services. And you talk to some principals in the public schools, they know which students are going to have trouble. They know the ones that are ostracized. They know the ones that are by themselves, their parent situations. And if we could spend a couple of $1,000s to give him or her, the right course of action, then it's going to be, you're going to have a productive young person.
Thank you.
Mayor McCallion, if I could just make a little pitch here. You know that we have the Youth Violence Group here at the Region, the committee. We have many councillors here today that sit on that committee.
Yes.
And we have been very successful up until this point, but I think the next steps have certainly been very clear that what we need to do is to have more money for research that we're, as you know, the police, the social services, the health people, they're all there. Members of councils are there. We have the two community, Mississauga Safe Community, the Rampton Safe Community group there. And we're trying to put together a budget of $1 million for 2009 to see if we can do the research that we think that needs to be done to help the police and all of the other groups get some of those answers, exactly the answers that you're looking for, what is behind and what are the reasons, what are the cause, and then how do we put the preventive programs in place in order to try to prevent future senseless killings like we have seen in this year in 2008. So I know we have a request now that we're actually working through the city and trying to access some money from the federal government, and I think these are the areas that we need help, that we can carry on the programs that we have done through that youth violence group. And also, you know, that the Board of Education is asking us to support more of the youth, the young youth in ages up from sort of when they start school till grade 6, 7, but we certainly know there's a gap from 7 on that we need to address, but I think we need to do the research in order to know that we're getting value for the money that we're spending. And so we'll be coming to you to help us lever some money if we can at both levels of government. But I think this is really a federal fund that we're looking for, and they do have a program, but we haven't been able to access it yet. But that's what we're working on. Mayor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well for organizing this meeting. As I sit on Peel Police Services Board, certainly when a mayor calls the chief of police with the alarming news that we're getting on an all too often basis, I know, Chief, when I called you, and I learned Mayor McCallion called you as well, everyone around this table is seeking information on what can we do on this side. We're alarmed at the tragedies that have unfolded here in the places where we all live. You said, what is acceptable? Well, everyone knows the answer is 0. And it's tough to break it down into dollars. I meet with the families. You and I have been to some of these homes, victims' families, and there are no words. The isolated incident with the 2 parents, I continue to meet with the young man and his sister, and they really represent what's in so many minds. Why was that person out on bail? Why do we err on the side of the culprit? When do we err on the side of the community safety at large? You commit an offense, or suspected of committing an offense that could hurt a person, you ought not to have another opportunity to find out if you really intend to. That's what the people of Brampton certainly saying to their mayor. They don't, I shouldn't say they don't, people are so frustrated that there seems to be no consequence, no real consequence to, I mean, when we grew up, you know, you get dressed, you put on your clothes, your socks, your shoes, you go to school. There are people today, part of their that's not mine. Part of their getting ready is obviously bring a weapon. I mean, nobody needs to carry a weapon. This is Brampton, this is Ontario, this is Canada. This is a place where we have a value for life, where we protect each other. The community raises the child. We believe it. Everybody believes in it. Yet there are some people who seem to set that aside, and they carry something that can hurt somebody else. 100% unacceptable. Whether you're bullying, pinching, or using a more dangerous weapon that actually injures or forever takes a life, what kind of people think that's okay? And when I see 1 million plus people in Peel, and we have how many people that are of that million that think it's okay to carry a weapon, or worse, use it. All of our programs are targeted at the 1 million good people, and we're reaching some people, and you can't measure the preventative situations. But how do we reach those few people in society, whatever the city, that think it's acceptable to have a weapon? When I look at the bullying statistics, and the highest number in your breakdown was altercations. When we had the incident, and I think it's in court right now, it's on the paper so I can reference it, of the young girl who was safely through her door after some, eye exchanges at an establishment. When you get home, when you're a father and you listen, or a parent, and you hear your kids, there they are, you can hear them outside the door, one, sort of half awake, waiting for your kids to get home. When you hear the door open and you hear the door close, whew, they're safe. This young girl wasn't even safe through her own door. What kind of people, if you can call them people, I don't think of them as just, the lowest end of the human race, that could be that vicious to another person and then run away. What a coward. I think the altercation numbers are most alarming. Sometimes you hear people involved in an altercation, they don't even know they're in one. Somebody else is trying to edge them on because they seem to lust getting into an altercation where they can prove themselves, maybe to join a gang or to, hurt somebody so they can say, look, check mark, I'm good enough to be part of your gang. I think that goes on. I look at our youth intervention monitoring program. It is working. Having police in schools, Peel's been doing this for years, and it is working. All the young people that we're monitoring, I've already spoken to the re-elected and newly elected federal members. In fact, I was at an event on the weekend with then candidates, and talking about community safety being the #1 issue on the minds of people, I think, today, maybe in the economy across Canada, but certainly with this recent rate, people are very concerned. Is their child safe to walk from school, to take the nice bicycle walking path, or is somebody going to want their shoes and go to any means to accomplish that? That's what people are asking the mayor. That's where we have to put our resources. I said to these candidates, and the entire system that we discussed, every single slide is property tax supported. They didn't know. They didn't know. The money that we need is money to hire the officers with the training to maintain the programs to get at these people before they arrive at an age where, they're the low end of the human spectrum. Animals don't treat each other this way. I don't know how much money we can spend across Canada at trying to reach those who can't be reached. And then we need the laws and the courts to keep them away from the very good people who live in our communities, which, how do you protect the good people? So you say, I have parents saying it's the time of the year where school busing decisions are being made by the school board, and then parents call, they believe we have something to do with school busing. We don't, but they say, listen, the path that's been plotted for my child to get to school involves going through a little park walkway and along what we would think is a nice tree valley and up into the schoolyard. They don't want their child walking. They want to know their child is going to be safe. They want to know that the 3 thugs that are standing in the bicycle path interviewing the kids on the way by, somebody's going to deal with that. In Peel, we deal with that with the bicycle system. We have a process. We're able to report that, and that's in place to displace those thugs to another area. But I think we have to, two things, Chair. I think there's a need for, whether it's a community workshop with schools and counselors, and being up to date on what the current challenges are. Community awareness is a big step to community safety. Be aware of yourself, be aware of what is a threatening situation. I remember in playgrounds, we used to have lots of shrubs, look nice, they turn colors in the fall. Not anymore, they're gone. You have to be able to see through all of these playground areas so nobody's lurking there. So there's many ways that we can be involved, and we should be speaking directly to the federal government about every dollar we can get. And we need to find the path to speak to the justice system that is far too lenient, in my view, certainly in the views of the people who've spoken to me as mayor, that people are often reoffending. I know we learned at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on our Crime and Safety Standing Committee that in Calgary, I think I mentioned this to you, Chief, they did a study just taking one person, how many times they've been rearrested. And that person had cost, I don't know, 9-10 million, same guy, over and over and over. So when you really look at the statistics and say, how many people are there that are really causing all of this tragedy? What's the answer to get those people permanently off the streets of our communities? And not, reduce sentence, 8 years, 2 years, and as you say, officers tied up 2 and 3 years trying to make sure the evidence is there, and then there's some process in the justice system where if we could find one little thread, then we're all out on bail, we get to do it again. How many people that commit a murder were previously part of that statistic of altercation or use of a weapon but not a homicide? I mean, use of a weapon but not a homicide is either a good medical system. I mean, how many people are fixed at the hospital so it's not a homicide statistic? The alarming number is the number of times people are trying to hurt somebody, and then they get away with it because the court system, the justice system, there's no consequence.
And notice how there's no introspection
I
how
think, Mr.
municipalities deal with people.
A community workshop. I believe this was done in the mid-90s. There was a workshop coordinating all of our ideas. We have a good people here in Peel. People want to know what to do. We have we're the top police, most respected police force in the country. But we will never prevent all of it. But I think we have to have bold outcomes. Not another program, bold outcomes. If we have to challenge the justice system here in the region of Peel, then so be it. It's always hands off when it gets over to the court. If we have to publish the name of the guy that signed so the judge or whoever is accountable for that guy that was out that murdered those 2 parents, to see the faces of that son and that daughter today. There's no accountability, Mr. Chairman. It's an invisible thing. After police arrest, it goes invisible. Somebody signed a sheet and said, I think
talking about accountability.
That guy's okay. He can be free. Bad decision, huh? So, Mr. Chairman, we're fortunate in Peel. We have such an outstanding police force. We're catching people. No deals in Peel. No. You get to the person, but people aren't worried about being caught because they get back out and they get to do it again. We keep them a little longer if they murder somebody, but they still get out, it seems. It's unacceptable to me, Mr. Chairman, when there are 1 million+ contributing citizens in one of the most diverse communities where we've got it right, we get along, we've figured it out. And there's these few people compared to the million that live here that just seem not to respect that. And we may have programs that we could come up with to find those people and ask them to their face, do they have a conscience? I mean, some of these people, maybe a program could have prevented that. Not sure of all. I don't know if it's just a question of money, it's a question of decency, it's a question of values, it's a question of respect of life, of human value. And we spend a lot of time talking about, how to figure out how to help these young people. But some of them, whether young, and you've said, it's not age, it's not restricted to age. Some people ought not to be out with the public. They're dangerous. They're just dangerous. And whether they'll hurt them, shove them, murder them. So we want to help the people, especially the children, Mr. Chairman, to get to see the value and respect of people, of each other. The old do unto others. It's a basic lesson to a young child. Some people maybe have never heard it. Do unto others as you would say. Just respect. So, Mr. Chairman, we hear the other side, but it's not talked about, of course, on the Police Services Board. And I want to punctuate again, thank you for coming. We said we have one meeting for both Peel, all of Peel. Brampton, designated an international safe city. Mississauga, safe city. Caledon, great places to live. Safe communities to bring up a family. How do we weed out, or fix, or help, or eliminate the people who want to harm somebody else? That's my question.
Mayor Moore, Council Moore.
You're just trying to get me in trouble there? Well, Chief Metcalf, thank you very much for coming here today. Councillor Gibson and myself, as you know, represent an area in Brampton where 3 of the 8 murders that have taken place in Brampton have occurred. And one of those murders a block away from where I live. And 2 of them, the double homicide, of course, the random one, which creates a whole different set of uneasiness in a community, because then everybody feels like a victim. I think instinctively people know that there's, behind a murder there is a relationship that takes place, but when it's random and everybody feels like it could be me next. And so I know that was handled incredibly well by the police. We had a community meeting, and so I know I expressed appreciation at that time, but I know you were there and rallied behind the community, and they appreciated it, and so did Councillor Gibson and myself. And certainly you've responded as a department with respect to the education programs and the initiatives to deal with violence in our communities, and municipalities have done the same thing through our programs at our recreation centers, and certainly here at the region. And I think that as a community and as a region, we know that it's a collective responsibility. And one of the difficulties that we have is having everybody respond and understand and having the skills they need to do that. We're doing it as we need to as a municipality and as a region. The police department's responding. Our sports groups are active and healthy and keeping our youth busy. There's various agencies that operate within our municipalities, and really there is no excuse for young people to not be busy. Sometimes there's financial restrictions for some parents, but there's also supports for those families as well. But you're always going to have young people that choose to engage in activity. You mentioned the activity that's not particularly healthy and productive. You mentioned that
when they go from senior elementary to secondary school, that they reach the age of entitlement. I thought that was really interesting. I recall when I was on the school board, and of course being involved in expulsion hearings, which are always a very uncomfortable and unsettling thing for school board trustees to be involved in, and certainly the incidents that lead to them are not the nicest. And I recall being involved, engaged in a conversation with some high school students. I said, help me to understand why it is that you bring weapons to school. What makes you think you need to bring weapons to school? And the grade 9 said, well, we come to high school for the first time and we're afraid of the senior students in the school, so we think we need to bring weapons to protect ourselves. And the grade 12 students said, well, we bring weapons to school because we're afraid of these grade 9 kids who come in. So, so it's interesting what you're saying. And how things have changed, that it really is an age, they think they've reached the age of entitlement. And I think what we need to do, what we need to wrap our heads around, is how do we help parents understand that they actually have attained the age of entitlement. Parents have attained the age of entitlement in the sense that they are entitled to know where their children are, who they are hanging around with, what they are looking at in terms of internet sites, what kinds of homes the parent or the children come from that their children are hanging around with. Parents are entitled to a whole lot of information that they are afraid to ask. And I think that we need to help parents get there. I had a conversation with a staff member just before you came in this morning, because I was here for an 8:30 meeting, and we were talking about you coming here this morning, and he was a Peel resident as well, and a comment was made that parents are walking away from their responsibility, and I don't believe that's true. I think they're afraid to walk into their responsibility, and we need to help them walk into their responsibility, because a 14-year-old can be a pretty scary creature, and they count on you as a parent to not be in communication with the school. They count on you to not communicate with their friends, to not communicate with their parents' friends in particular, and to not ask the questions, and they will push back. So I think that, we need to absolutely work with the senior elementary students and prepare them to go to high school. But we absolutely need to work with the parents, because it's important to be involved with your children at all stages of their life. But I think something happens with the relationship between the parents and the school once they go to high school. They think they don't have to be as engaged, they don't have to be as involved. And part of that is the 14 and 15-year-old push back. And parents are afraid to, just to push them a little bit harder. And they really aren't as scary as they want you to believe they are. So, we need to think about that as well. But we are collectively in this together. And I think instinctively parents know that as well, and are maybe just a little bit afraid to ask, because it's not easy as a parent to say, I need help.
Want to respond to that, Chief?
Well, I can't say I agree with Councillor Moore, and we've actually had instances where, in relation to our neighborhood policing unit, where we've been in the what we call the IMP program, even though that's a bad acronym for it. They're really not IMPs. We try not to see them. Where the parent has asked our officer to tell their children not to do this because they didn't want to be the one responsible for saying no. And I think you and I have both been through that. Sometimes it's difficult being a parent, and you have to say no. If you want to take the responsibility and direct your child in the right path, then you better be prepared to do that. We'll show you how to do it, if you like, but you have to continue it. We cannot be the parent, and we're certainly willing to help. But you're quite right. I always remember my transition from public school to high school. It was a lot different in just the classroom setting, what you had to do in relation to studying and homework and essays and things like that. It's a big jump. And all of a sudden you get there, grade 10, 11, 12 kids, they're consuming alcohol, they're smoking cigarettes, they're smoking marijuana. Now it's a big new world. And I don't think they're prepared to go into that.
Well, and I think, we've had a lot of discussion in the city of Brampton about basement apartments. And, they carry with them, a whole bunch of things that need to be addressed. But one that we don't talk about, we talk about, too many cars in the driveway and property standards issues related to them and, fire and safety standards with respect to the home, the structural environment. But there's also something, oftentimes, there's too many people living in the basement apartment than what are comfortable to sit around and watch TV and whatnot. So the children who live in that home, and often the young teen, is hanging around somewhere because there's really just room to come home and sleep. And so it's not a structural environment from the sense of those property standards issues, but it's a societal element to that as well. So that's why I said we need to, it's interesting to say they want the police to come home and tell their kids to stop doing something.
That, they want us to discipline so they remain in a good light.
Exactly.
Last speaker, Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief. I have to echo, I think the original police are absolutely the most outstanding police force in all of our country. There's no question, and I know how well you work with your counterparts across the country and across North America. And we're struggling here with an issue that 20 years ago we never would have envisioned. And I sit as the Vice Chair of the Peel Youth Violence Committee. I work with various entities on vulnerable communities in my ward, all of us do. And I guess listening to you today, I think some of us need to hear, how can we work together? The police are facing this problem, you are facing this problem. You have 24 homicides of different natures in every case. There was I never thought I would be saying there was a murder in my backyard. And there was, and I was sort of out there trying to figure out what was going on, and your officers were truly amazing, respectful to the community who wanted to know what was going on, obviously not able to tell anybody really what was going on, but they treated the surrounding community with the greatest of respect. I really felt sorry for the superintendent. It's his first week on the job at 11th Division, and he's faced with this. And the community got every reassurance at all turns. So you truly are doing an amazing job. But how can we help you? How can we as a council, as a community, as a society overall, how can we resolve some of these issues, if not all of these issues? Yeah, it's ridiculous to think that 0 is the absolute number. That's where we want to be. But how can we work? We're not going to get there. Reality says that. But how can we work together? I know on the Peel Youth Violence Prevention Committee, we have representatives from across the region, including school boards, police. There are members of that committee here today, very interested in what you have to say. We have working groups out in the community, working in the community across all sectors. All of these efforts are going in, but how can we come to some viable working arrangements whereby we can all work together with a goal in mind, whereby we can include families who have, I know out there are lots of families with some real needs for parenting skills. Yeah, I mean, we've all had teenagers, we've all been teenagers, and it can be a fine line sometime as to which way they go. But there's the justice system, there's the Freedom of Information Act. I know that can create some huge issues. community development, how can we work together? Is there a way to put a plan in place whereby we can all work together to try and combat some of these issues, some of these problems, do some sharing, do some mentoring of each other in the work that we all try to do to prevent this sort of circumstance that we find ourselves in?
I think, Councillor, you saw what we've been doing through the presentation, and I think we did an excellent job.
And if I may interrupt, absolutely, absolutely, and in all of those programs, I'm well aware of them all, and your officers do an outstanding job. I went for a walk with the community liaison officer to show him a couple of things, and it's amazing the number of kids he knew just on that little walk. So getting out there into the community and just being a face to some of those community members.
And that's not, some of the younger people that we meet, it's not in a negative sense. We've kind of changed our approach, especially in relation to NPU. It doesn't have to be a negative contact. We like talking to them, and they're amazed. And we learned this through the focus group for the strategic plan. We watch hockey games.
Yeah.
We watch basketball. We play basketball. They thought that they just saw the blue uniform and there was really no character behind it. So we've made a determined effort to just engage our youth on a social basis. Get to what do we do? Again, it's a complex issue. Mayor Fallon talked about courts. Got to be careful with what you say with courts. But I think it's one issue and one example I'm going to use. We become a source country for production of marijuana. We have, definitely. That's what we do. And it's marijuana grow-ops because there is absolutely no fear of going into any courthouse and getting a heavy sentence. We transport it down to the States because if you throw it down here, you get about 15 years. Up here, you may get 5, you may get some probation. So it's worth your while to do that. So there is an issue, of course, as the mayor. What can we can tackle that. But then you get into the judge's prerogative on sentencing. There's submissions made, and it's his decision, and that's why he's appointed. We have to respect that appointment. As I mentioned before, I think we got to get to these children younger. Now, whether it's I make an approach to the board, the regional council, to expand our program in relation to our feeder schools, because you go into a feeder school, there's not one bad kid there. They're all happy, young people. And then this big shift when they go into high school, and all of a sudden it's a different world, for a lot of reasons I just mentioned. We've got to prepare them for that. You've got to steer them away from that. Now, it might be the policing combination with social service. It may be we get out as far as the parenting aspect of I know how to parent, but it was trial and error for me. But I'm quite proud of my 2 kids. They're quite successful. But it wasn't always nice. I certainly never abused them, but I was pretty strict because I wanted them to turn out. And I did. And you've got to say no. And my wife was quite happy that I was the one that said no. But it was worth it. And I think you've got to teach these skills to some parents, and we're quite willing to help. It might be something we can do in the Crime Prevention Academy. It might be something like that. We're quite willing to explore anything. Because again, it's going to be productive down the road.
Can I just I'd like to officially invite you to one of our meetings of the youth prevention, and where we can talk about some of those things.
Sure.
You have officers at those committee meetings.